Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Graystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Graystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.
Alright, welcome back to the podcast, guys. Hope you had a good week. Missed a week last week, so you've probably noticed there's a little bit of a gap. We had a big online event for the trading community, so I was out of action for a week, but wanted to crack straight on this week and get stuck back into it. Hopefully you're enjoying the podcast. If this is the first time you're listening, this is the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. And hopefully you've got some nuggets if you've been listening over the last 22, 23 episodes. You've got some nuggets and you've found some value and some take-home key bits of information and ideas that you've been able to, instantly, directly action in your life that can immediately have effect or transformational effects in some cases. So, if you haven't already given a little review to this, please just take 5 seconds to give it a little review and give it a little rating as well. I think at the time of this recording, I've got about 1 or 2 to get to for 100 reviews. There's about 178 5-star ratings, but there's about 98 or 99 reviews. So who's going to be the 100th? So this week, what I really wanted to talk about, I've got a couple of things I want to talk about really, and it all span off of a conversation and a post that I saw actually. So the first thing I want to talk about is this idea of retirement, okay? Because this podcast is all about empowerment and financial empowerment and wealth creation, okay? So chances are the people listening to this podcast have got kind of a different outlook on retirement. It's not, it's not maybe seen as the same thing as, the majority of people, I guess. And the other day I saw this post from a young girl who was on, I think it was on an Instagram story, and this young girl is about 22 or 23, okay? And the post was basically a dark kind of morning. She was leaving for work, and the text over the story said, "My dad retires today. I'm so jealous." Now, this is a 22 or 23-year-old girl wishing her life away, being jealous of her dad, who is 40 years ahead of her plus. And she's jealous of the retirement because she thinks that she's got to spend 45 years doing something that she hates to get to this day where you just pack it all in. And it really put things into perspective, for me even, of how some people view retirement. And I guess I'd never really sat and thought about it before, but retirement is just, what we must understand is retirement is just something that's been created by corporations. Okay, it's not something that you're not naturally, no one is naturally going to want to get to 65 years old and then say, right, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to sell all my gear, sell all my equipment, I'm turning the camera off, turning the phone off, turning this podcast off, that's it, I'm done. It's not a thing. That isn't what we want to do. We've got this urge to want to help and serve. And plus, when you're 65, you're not going to feel 65, you're just going to feel the same. You don't just overnight change and you become like, oh, that's it, I'm done, I can't do anything anymore. So the only reason that we have this retirement is because one day Ford Motors had this genius idea that they could get people to work for them by saying, if you come and work for me for, cheap for 40 years, we will then pay you for 40 years. And what you have to do is you have to work till you're 65, and then we'll pay you an income for the rest of your days. And everyone was like, well, yeah, that sounds like a good deal. But at the time when they set it up, people weren't living as long. Okay, so people weren't living as long as they do now. We're living longer and longer and longer. So they thought, they had the upper hand, and they did to a degree. But then when people started living longer, it didn't matter because no one was taking advantage of the pension anyway. People weren't paying into it. They weren't, they just wasn't taking it. So they were like, the corporations were rubbing their hands together because they were thinking, well, we've got these workers who are just going to work for us now for cheap, and we don't even have to pay them at the end of it. We have to pay them a tiny amount, a minimum amount. So the reason everyone looks forward to a pension are the people, is because they've been in a job that they're disempowered in. They're resentful, or they don't get up every morning wanting to do that job. So they look forward to the 65 point where they can go, now I can stop working. But I would much rather not look forward to being 65. I would much rather build the life and spend every day doing something that you enjoy, so that retirement isn't a thing. Like, retirement is just a made up term and a made up action that takes place in corporations. It's just, it's not, it's not compulsory. You don't have to retire. I'd never see, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and, I'm sure Steve Jobs, if he was still here, he wouldn't be retiring at 65. In fact, I'm sure Steve Jobs, before he died, he would have given anything to kind of carry on. And that's what happens. That's what happens when we're driven and we're motivated by doing something that we enjoy and that we love and we're passionate about. So what it kind of made me start thinking about was how we are so indoctrinated and how we've been kind of manipulated and brainwashed into these kind of perpetuated, handed down methodologies and thought processes. And it started to make me think, because this is very, very common. Society has been constantly driven down and preached to in terms of what we should and shouldn't do. And this has been going on for centuries and centuries and thousands of years, by religion even. And it's always been this kind of manipulation towards you should give more than you should receive. So, last week's episode about the kind of altruistic and narcissistic tendencies and qualities and the balance being both, this is kind of the same thing. We've always been kind of pushed towards the idea that it's better to give than to receive, and that message, even with pensions and retirement, you should give us 40 years of your life, and the only people that end up benefiting are the perpetuators of the message. So and they end up doing the opposite, and as a result, they amass huge fortune and influence. Religions, for instance. You see the churches where they say it's better to give than to receive, and I think Jesus himself said it's more blessed to give than to receive, but it's an incomplete truth. And if you look at the churches, they are multi-billion dollar companies. They are raking it in. I've seen some of these churches, they look like stadiums where they've got these high-tech sound systems and they look like stadiums. And what it means is whilst the people are kind of pushing that message, they're usually doing the opposite, and they're the rich ones. So take Ford Motors, for instance. They were the ones pushing pensions and retirement. They're one of the biggest companies on the planet. And at the time, Henry Ford was one of the richest men on the planet. So you have to be careful about what you hear and what advice you take, because they're usually incomplete truths. And the ones that end up breaking through, like you guys, are the ones that actually stand up one day and go, no, actually, I'm going to take a bit more. I want a bit more. And if you don't do that, you start letting people dictate to you and push you around, and you end up letting them do that all your life until you're thinking, God, I can't wait till I'm 65 and I can retire. And I've spoke about all this before in terms of, you must get on the property ladder, and I did a video on that, and I was having a conversation about property last night, and how, people who say you have to get on the property ladder haven't necessarily achieved the level of financial independence that you're after, and then you later realise that that's because buying a house to live in has nothing to do with financial independence. It's not related at all, and that's another example of that kind of message that's pushed down. But they're not doing well because they've been told they should be pushed down. And who's the perpetuator of that message? The banks. And are the banks rich? Yes, the banks are very, very rich. We seem to just happily go along with what other people are doing because we fear being the odd one out. And the truth is, if you're doing what the perpetuators do, the rich people do, the wealthy people do, you are going to be going against the grain. You are going to be the minority. And that's why. Because it's a way of, the people who control the masses are the minority. But it's the minority that have the dream life. There's a really good video I want to share with you. I'll put the link in this description. But there's this video I watched on YouTube where they did this experiment in a doctor's waiting room, and they set it up so that they had to do this funny. When the bell rang, the actor had to stand up, okay, while the bell rang, and then they sat back down, and then more people came into the waiting room, and this actor kept doing it, and the actor said, oh, they said that I just had to do this. And then over the course of the time, the waiting room starts to fill up and everyone is doing it. Everyone's standing up and sitting down when this bell goes off. And it's because no one wants to be the odd one out. No one wants to be left out. So go and check that video out. But really where this went to, what the actual topic, for the podcast this week, I wanted to talk about how this kind of plays out in business as well. Because what we do is I see these people starting a business, right? And starting a business, it can be daunting, and it's something that's new to some people. But it's especially difficult when the first thing that they believe they've got to go and do is spend loads of money. Okay? One thing you see people do is they start the business and immediately they're giving away their products to friends or giving discounts to friends. But they should be the ones actually supporting you. If anything, they should be paying more, right? Because you're just getting the business off the ground. And if you're kind of giving away freebies and all that, that's not going to last very long. That's not a very good business model. But secondly, I see it so many times, and I don't know if it's because people hate focusing on sales and going to actually get sales, but the first thing they do is decide that the most important thing that I've got to get is business cards and flyers and leaflets, and they spend hundreds of pounds getting business cards, and at that point they don't even know if their business or product has a demand, or they don't even know if they haven't tested the concept. They haven't actually gone out and tried to push it. But no, they're getting all these business cards because they think that's going to make them look like a business, and it's just what they've been told. Guess who the biggest perpetuators of that message were? One of the oldest entrepreneurs, which are the printers. Okay, you've got to have business cards. You've got to look. You don't have to have business cards anymore. We're a digital world. I've never ever had a business card ever. In fact, I refuse. When we go to meetings, I remember when I used to go to meetings and they'd be like, oh, have you got a business card? I was like, no, I don't carry them. And they'd be like, oh, how come? And I was like, well, you've obviously got my details. I'm here. I'm in this meeting. So you had all my details to arrange the meeting, and now you're asking for a business card. It's just weird. And I get that they're good for networking if you're just meeting people and giving details. And I think if anyone's listening to this, I think someone should create an app where you do like a contactless business card where you just splash the phone, beep, and it just converts the business details across the phone. But anyway, going off on a bit of a tangent. But another thing I see is people start like thinking they've got to spend thousands of pounds on a website, a flash website. I've seen people spend 10, 20 grand on a website before their business is selling products. And I've seen people do big launch parties where they'll spend 10, 15, 20 grand on a launch party. And that is the last thing you want to do when you're starting a business. And if you're doing all that stuff, it's no wonder that people are worried about starting a business. This is no wonder, right? My advice is to be as lean as possible when you start a business, particularly in today's age where there's no need to spend any money. So I've just started a company called the Graystone Education, okay, and this is going to be where my Tears of Freedom program is hosted, and I've got big plans for this company, right? I'm going to be working with schools, kids, really changing the world in terms of financial empowerment and wealth creation. And I've just, let me run you through some costs, right? I decided that was going to be the company, Graystone Education. I set up a website. I bought a domain. I bought Graystone. I bought the tearsoffreedom.com, which was £23. Okay. I then bought a website. Okay, so the website cost me £59. And then the formation of the company, the actual formation of the company, cost about £79. Now, the plan for this company, this in particular company, because I've planned it, okay, because another big thing that people go into business, the mistake they make is thinking they've got to have this big idea and maybe it will or won't work. Well, there's no maybe about it. When the likes of Apple and Google and Amazon, they sit down, they don't ever sit around a table and go, oh, maybe it'll work. Let's try this. They don't do that. There's a plan. So how I've planned the distribution of services through this particular business, it should get to around between 360 and half a million in the first 12 months, and then 1.3 million in year 2, 1.8 million in year 3, and then it will be scaled up, depending on venturing into different territory, markets, products, and utilizing partnerships. But that is a very solid plan, and it's a realistic plan for a company that cost around, under £200 to start. And the most important thing is here, before I've started the company, I haven't worried about business cards, leaflets, flyers, tens of thousands of pounds on websites. What I've focused on is delivering lots and lots of value and proving the concept, proving the demand. These newsletters, these podcasts, me going and do talks at schools and businesses, people coming up to me saying that was mind-blowing, the feedback on the podcast, the feedback on the newsletter. I'm now confident that I can go out and serve and there's a demand for what I'm teaching, and I know that I can help people. Now, what has that cost me? It's cost me a few hours of my time writing newsletters and podcasts. I haven't spent a penny on proving the concept. So I just want to kind of round it up. I hope that's, I don't want to go on for too long about this, but the really take home from this podcast is the perpetuators of certain messages that the masses are, abide to are usually the ones that you want to copy. They're the ones who are doing the complete opposite to the message they're giving out, and you need to be careful of how you take that information. And if you really want to succeed and excel, you need to consider doing what they're doing and not what the masses are doing. And when you do it all the right way and you do it on your terms and you don't blow a load of money starting a business on stupid stuff, and you're methodical in your approach, you don't have to ever worry about retirement, because you're going to have an amazing life, an empowered life, an inspiring life, and you're going to spend the time doing what you want to do. And you won't be thinking about this 65-year-old retirement age, because it's just a made-up date in the company calendar. That is it. So hopefully you got a little take home from that. Don't go and blow loads of money on starting a business if you're about to. Don't do launch parties, don't do websites, don't do business cards. Just give value, get feedback, prove the demand is there, then start dripping some money into it, and then you can take it from there. So hopefully you got value from this episode. If you did, please share it with someone else who'd like to hear it. If someone's thinking about starting a business, or if someone's always going on about retiring and all that kind of stuff, share this podcast with them. Give it a little rating and review as well, again. And have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next week.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.